The stars had always watched humanity in silence. For nearly 100 years, Earth existed at the edge of the galactic coalition like a small child sitting at a table of giants. The aliens allowed humans to exist. They traded with them sometimes, but they never respected them. To the ancient species of the galaxy, humanity was young, loud, and unimportant. Admiral Park understood this better than most. He was 63 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. He commanded the Earth Defense Fleet from an orbital station called Horizon. The station floated above Earth like a metal moon, always watching, always waiting. Park had served in the military for 40 years. He had fought pirates, stopped rebellions, and protected mining colonies on distant moons. But he had never fought a real war. Earth had never been important enough to fight for. His second-in-command was a woman named Lee. She was 38, with sharp features and a reputation that made enemy pilots afraid. They called her Ghost because she moved through battle like smoke. She had earned her rank by defending Earth's outer colonies when no one else would. She was loyal to Park, and Park trusted her completely. On a cold evening in December, Park sat alone in his office, looking out at the stars. The Horizon station was quiet. Most of the crew was asleep. Only the soft hum of machines filled the air. Then the signal came. It burst through every channel at once. Emergency frequencies, military bands, civilian networks. It was everywhere. Park sat up straight as the message played through his speakers. "This is High Commander of the Hegemony. Our is under attack. The hollow swarm has reached prime. Our defenses are failing. Our people are dying. We request immediate assistance from all coalition members. Please, we cannot survive alone." The message repeated, again and again. The voice was calm at first, but Park could hear the fear growing with each repetition. By the fifth time, High Commander sounded like a man watching his world burn. Park stood slowly. They were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They had been part of the coalition for thousands of years. Their ships were powerful. Their technology was advanced. Their armies were legendary. If they were asking for help, the situation was worse than anything Park could imagine. The Hollow Swarm, Park knew the name. Everyone did. They were not a species in the normal sense. They were a hunger-given form, billions of creatures that moved as one mind. They did not conquer worlds. They consumed them. They stripped planets down to bare rock and moved on to the next meal. No one knew where they came from. No one knew how to stop them. Commander entered his office without knocking. Her face was pale. "You heard it," Park said. "It was not a question." The whole station heard it. The whole planet probably heard it, walked to the window and stood beside him. "The coalition will respond. They have to." Park said nothing. He had been watching galactic politics for decades. He knew how the coalition worked. He knew how alien minds thought about war and death and sacrifice. 2 hours later, the Coalition Council convened. Representatives from 12 species gathered in a virtual chamber. Park and watched the broadcast from Horizon. The representative begged for assistance. He showed images of the swarm eating through cities. He showed videos of children running from monsters that looked like nightmares made of metal and flesh. The council debated. The worried about spreading their forces too thin. The crystalline calculated the economic cost of intervention. The reptilian reminded everyone that they had been their rivals for centuries. One by one, the great species of the galaxy found reasons to do nothing. "The swarm has not threatened our territory," said the ambassador. "They have sufficient military strength to handle this matter," said the delegate, even as ships burned on the screen behind him. "Perhaps this is simply the natural order of things," said the counselor with a shrug of his scaled shoulders. Earth's representative tried to speak. She was a young diplomat named Sora, brilliant but inexperienced. The council barely acknowledged her. When she proposed a joint rescue mission, the ambassador made a sound that might have been laughter. "The humans wish to play hero," he said. "How amusing. What would you send? Your tiny fleet, Your primitive weapons, you would be consumed before you reached prime. The vote was taken. The motion to assist the failed. 11 species voted against. Only Earth voted in favor. The broadcast ended. Park stood in silence for a long moment, watched him carefully. She had served under him for 15 years. She had never seen him look so tired. "They are going to let an entire civilization die," she said quietly. "Yes," Park replied, "they are. Billions of people, thousands of years of history, gone, because no one wants to take the risk." Park walked to his desk and opened a communication channel. His fingers moved slowly, as if he was giving himself time to change his mind. But he did not change his mind. Admiral asked. "The Coalition has made its decision," Park said, "but the Coalition does not speak for Earth. Not today." He pressed a button. His voice echoed through every ship in the Earth Defense Fleet. "All hands, this is Admiral Park. By now you have heard the distress call from Prime. You have seen the Coalition's response. They have chosen to stand aside and watch a civilization burn. I cannot accept that choice. I will not accept it." He paused. The weight of what he was about to do pressed down on him like a physical force. "I am ordering the full mobilization of the Earth Defense Fleet. We will depart for Prime within 24 hours. I am not going to lie to you. This mission is not sanctioned by the Coalition. It may be considered an act of rebellion. The enemy we face has destroyed worlds without number. Many of us will not return." Park looked out at the stars. "But I believe there are moments that define what a species truly is. Not our technology, not our power, not our wealth, but our willingness to stand when others kneel, to fight when others flee, to help when others turn away. They did not ask for us. The Coalition does not want us there. But those who defend Earth are never ignored. And today we answer a call that was meant for anyone brave enough to hear it." He straightened his uniform. "All ships prepare for departure. We fly at dawn." He closed the channel. Stood at attention. Her eyes were bright with something that might have been fear or might have been pride. "The Coalition will be furious," she said. "They might expel us. They might sanction us. They might even attack us when this is over." Park nodded slowly. "Probably. And we are almost certainly going to die out there." "Probably." Smiled. It was not a happy smile, but it was real. "Then I should go prepare my pilots." She saluted and left. Admiral Park stood alone in his office, watching Earth turn slowly below. Somewhere out there, across the vast emptiness of space, a world was dying. And against all logic, against all reason, against the wishes of every other species in the galaxy, humanity was going to try to save it. He did not know if they would succeed. He did not know if he would survive. But he knew with absolute certainty that this was the right thing to do. And sometimes that was enough. News spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. The humans were going to fight the Hollow Swarm. The humans, with their small fleet and their outdated ships and their soft bodies, were flying to Prime. The reaction was immediate and universal. The aliens laughed. On 100 worlds, in 1,000 languages, the same jokes were told. The humans think they are heroes. The humans think they can make a difference. The humans are going to die, and no one will remember their names. The ambassador called it the most entertaining suicide in galactic history. The military analysts calculated that the human fleet would last approximately 4 hours against the swarm. They were being generous. On Earth, the reaction was different. In the great cities, protests erupted within hours of Park's announcement. Millions of people filled the streets. Some carried signs demanding that the fleet stay home. They shouted about wasting resources, about throwing lives away, about a war that was not their problem. Politicians gave angry speeches. They called Park a criminal. They called him a madman. They demanded his arrest. But something strange happened as the day went on. The protests began to change. It started with small groups, veterans who had served in the outer colonies, families who had lost loved ones to pirate attacks and never received justice, young people who had grown up hearing that humanity was weak and unimportant. They came to the protests with different signs. They came with different words. We stand with the fleet. Earth answers the call. Today we are not small. By evening, the angry crowds had split in two. Those who wanted the fleet to stay screamed at those who wanted the fleet to go. There were fights. There were tears. There were moments of silence when everyone simply looked up at the sky and wondered what tomorrow would bring. And through it all, volunteers flooded the recruitment centers. They came from everywhere. Retired soldiers who had not held a weapon in 20 years. Engineers who knew how to fix ships and nothing else. Teachers who wanted to help in any way they could. Doctors who knew there would be wounded. Students who had never seen real combat but could not sit at home while others fought. Sergeant watched them arrive at the military base outside Seoul. He was 35 years old, built like a machine, with scars on his hands from a decade of ground combat. He led a battalion of infantry soldiers, the men and women who would fight on the surface of Prime. The real war. The bloody war. The war where you could see the enemy's eyes before you killed them. "Look at them," said one of his corporals, a young man named. "Half of them have never fired a weapon." "They will learn," replied. "In 24 hours." Did not answer. He watched a girl, probably no older than 22, struggling to carry her equipment bag. She was small and thin, with a face that looked too soft for war. Her name tag read. Her uniform said she was a medic. He walked over to her. "First deployment?" he asked. She looked up at him. Her eyes were afraid, but her jaw was set. "Yes, Sergeant." "Why did you volunteer?" Was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My brother is sick. The military pays for medical treatment. If I serve, he gets the surgery he needs." Studied her face. He had heard 100 reasons why people joined the army. Money, glory, revenge, boredom. But this was different. This girl was not here because she wanted to fight. She was here because someone she loved needed help. She was already fighting a war before she even left Earth. "Stay close to me when we land," he said. "Do your job, keep your head down, and do not die." "Yes, Sergeant." He walked away. Behind him, took a deep breath and kept walking toward the transport ship. In orbit, Commander Lee prepared her pilots for the mission ahead. She stood in the briefing room of the flagship Eternal Dawn, looking at the faces of the men and women who would follow her into battle. They were the best pilots in the Earth fleet. They were also terrified. "I am not going to tell you this will be easy," said. "It will not be easy. The swarm has more ships than we can count. Their fighters are fast and they do not feel fear. Many of you will die tomorrow." The room was silent. "But I have flown with most of you for years. I know what you are capable of. I know that when the fighting starts, you will not run. You will not freeze. You will do your jobs and you will protect the soldiers on the ground, and you will make the enemy regret the day they ever saw a human ship." She paused. "Questions?" A young pilot raised his hand. His name was Han Minyu, and he was 26 years old. This would be his first real battle. "Commander," he said, "why are we doing this? They never helped us. They looked down on us for 100 years. Why should we die for them?" Thought about the question. It was a fair question. It was the question everyone was asking. "Do you know why the coalition thinks we are weak?" she said. "It is not because our ships are slow. It is not because our weapons are primitive. It is because we care about things that do not benefit us. We help strangers. We mourn enemies. We believe that a life has value even if that life belongs to someone we have never met." She looked at Minyu. "They did not ask for our help. They do not deserve our help. But there are children on Prime right now, hiding in basements, listening to monsters tear apart their world. They did nothing wrong. They just happened to be born on a planet that the swarm decided to eat. And if we can save even one of those children, then this mission is worth everything we have." Minyu nodded slowly. He did not look happy, but he looked like he understood. Any other questions? There were none. Then get to your ships. We launch in 6 hours. On the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, Admiral Park made the final preparations. The fleet was ready. 147 ships, ranging from massive carriers to small patrol vessels. It was everything Earth had. If they lost this fleet, Earth would be defenseless. The Coalition had sent a final message demanding that the fleet stand down. Park had read it once and deleted it. Now he stood before the main, looking at the stars. Somewhere out there, past the light of 1,000 suns, Prime was burning. He could almost hear the screams. "Admiral," said his communications officer, "all ships report ready." Park nodded. He pressed the button that would broadcast his voice to every ship, every soldier, every human being who had chosen to follow him into the dark. "This is Admiral Park. We are about to do something that the galaxy believes is impossible. We are about to fight a war that we cannot win, for a people who never asked for our help, against an enemy that has never been defeated. The odds are against us. The Coalition has abandoned us. History says we should stay home and save ourselves." He paused. "But we are human, and humans do not do what history says we should do. We do what is right. We stand when we are told to kneel. We fight when we are told to surrender. We hope when we are told to despair. This is who we are. This is who we have always been. And today, the galaxy will see what that means." He looked at the coordinates for Prime. "All ships engage hyperspace drives. We have a world to save." The stars stretched into lines of light. The fleet vanished into the void. And Earth, for the first time in its history, went to war not for survival, not for profit, not for revenge. Earth went to war because it was the right thing to do. The galaxy watched in silence. And somewhere, in the hearts of 1 billion beings across 1,000 worlds, something small and quiet began to stir. It felt almost like hope. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace into a nightmare. Admiral Park had seen war before. He had watched ships burn and soldiers die. He had walked through the remains of battles that killed thousands, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he saw at Prime. Half the planet was gone. Not destroyed, not burned, gone. The hollow swarm had eaten through continents like a disease eating through flesh. Where there had once been cities, there was now gray nothing. Where there had once been forests and oceans, there was now bare rock covered in strange organic patterns. The swarm was not just killing they were erasing them. "My God," whispered someone on the bridge. Park said nothing. His eyes moved across the tactical display, counting enemy contacts. He stopped counting at 10,000. There were more, many more. The swarm filled the space around Prime like a cloud of hungry insects. Their ships were not beautiful like vessels or functional like human ones. They were ugly things, half metal and half meat, covered in spines and tendrils and things that might have been eyes. And they were all turning toward the human fleet. "Admiral," said the tactical officer, "the swarm has detected us. Multiple contacts changing course to intercept." "How many?" "At least 3,000. Park looked at his fleet. 147 ships against 3,000. And those 3,000 were just the first wave. "Commander," he said into his communicator, "launch all fighters. Standard defensive formation. Buy our ground forces time to deploy." "Understood, Admiral." Was already in her cockpit when the order came. Her fighter, a sleek machine called the Ghost, powered up around her. She felt the familiar vibration of engines coming to life. Through her canopy, she could see hundreds of other fighters launching from the carriers, forming up into squadrons, preparing for the impossible. "All wings, this is Ghost Leader," she said. "Stay tight. Watch your do not chase kills. We are here to protect the transports, not to be heroes. The ground forces are counting on us." A chorus of acknowledgments filled her headset. The first swarm fighters reached them less than a minute later. They were fast, faster than anything had ever fought. They moved like living things, twisting and spinning in ways that should have been impossible. Their weapons were not lasers or missiles, but streams of organic matter that burned through metal like acid. His first kill came in the opening seconds. A swarm fighter tried to pass her on the left, and she put 3 rounds through its center mass. It exploded in a burst of black liquid and gray smoke. She did not celebrate. There was no time. Ghost 3 break right. I see him, I see him. Ghost 7 is hit. Ghost 7 is going down. The radio filled with screams and warnings and the sound of young pilots dying flew through the chaos like a woman possessed. She twisted between enemy ships. She fired without thinking. Her hands moved on instinct, trained by years of combat and thousands of hours of simulation. In the first 5 minutes, she killed 12 swarm fighters. It was not enough. "Commander," said a voice in her ear, "we are losing too many. We cannot hold them." "We hold them," said. "We hold them until the transports are clear." Below, on the burning surface of Prime, the human transport ships were landing. They came down hard, punching through the atmosphere, dodging swarm anti-air fire that rose from the ground like angry lightning. Many did not make it. Transport 14 exploded in midair. Transport 23 crashed into a swarm nest and was torn apart before it even stopped moving. But some made it through. Sergeant was the first one off Transport 9. His boots hit the ground of Prime, and immediately he knew this was going to be worse than he imagined. The air smelled wrong. It smelled like meat and chemicals, and something his brain refused to identify. The ground was covered in a thin layer of gray substance that crunched under his feet. "Form up," he shouted. "First squad, secure the perimeter. Second squad, start unloading equipment. Third squad, find me some cover." His soldiers moved quickly. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes, but they were also trained, and training held when courage failed. Private stumbled out of the transport, her medical bag clutched to her chest. She looked around at the alien landscape, at the sky filled with burning ships, at the horizon where swarm creatures moved like a black tide. "Stay close," told her. "Do your job." "Yes, Sergeant." They had landed near the capital city. Once it must have been beautiful. They built their cities like art, with tall spires and flowing curves and materials that glowed with inner light. Now most of those spires were broken. Half the city was buried under swarm growth. Fires burned everywhere. And there were survivors. Saw them emerging from the ruins. Civilians, their silver skin covered in dust and blood, their 4 eyes wide with terror and confusion. They saw the human soldiers and did not seem to understand what they were seeing. "Sergeant," said Corporal, "what do we do with them?" "We save them. That is why we are here." The first swarm drones reached them 2 minutes later. They came out of a collapsed building, dozens of them, each one the size of a large dog. They had too many legs and too many teeth, and they moved with a horrible clicking sound that would hear in his nightmares for the rest of his life. They did not hesitate. They did not scout or plan or communicate. They simply attacked. "Open fire." The soldiers fired. Squad cut down the first wave. The drones died screaming, spilling dark liquid onto the gray ground. But more came. Always more. They poured out of buildings, out of holes in the ground, out of the swarm growth that covered everything. Shot until his weapon overheated. He switched to his sidearm. He shot until that was empty. Then he used his knife. Around him, his soldiers did the same. Some fell. A young man named Park went down with 3 drones on top of him. A woman named took a claw to the throat and died before she hit the ground. Private did not fight. She did her job. She dragged wounded soldiers to cover. She sealed wounds and injected painkillers and whispered lies about how everything was going to be okay. A drone came at her, and she hit it with her medical bag hard enough to crack its skull. Then she went back to saving lives. "Sergeant," someone shouted, Civilians trapped in that building. Looked, a structure that might have been a school was surrounded by drones. Through the broken windows he could see huddled inside. Small ones. Children. Take your squad, clear a path. We are barely holding here. I did not ask for your opinion. Move. Moved. His squad followed. They carved through the drones like a blade through flesh, taking casualties with every step but never stopping. They reached the building. They held the entrance while children ran out, their small hands reaching for anyone who would protect them. A mother grabbed his arm. She said something in her language that he did not understand, but he understood her eyes. He understood the way she looked at her children, the same way any mother would look at her children in a moment like this. "We are going to get you out," he said, knowing she could not understand his words but hoping she could understand his tone. "You are safe now." In orbit, Admiral Park watched the battle unfold. The tactical display was a mess of red and blue markers, explosions and dying ships and chaos in every direction. His fleet was taking heavy losses. Commander had lost half her fighters. The ground forces were barely holding their landing zones. But they were holding. "Admiral," said his communications officer, "incoming transmission from the flagship." The screen flickered. High Commander appeared, his silver face streaked with blood, his 4 eyes burning with something Park could not identify. "Why?" asked. His voice was raw. "Why are you here? You owe us nothing. We treated your kind as beneath notice." Park looked at the alien commander. He thought about all the years Earth had spent being ignored. He thought about the jokes and the dismissals, and the way the coalition had voted to let them die. "You needed help," Park said simply. That was enough. The transmission ended. Through the Park saw the remaining warships changing course. They were forming up alongside the human fleet. Broken and burning and outnumbered, they were rejoining the fight. The battle was far from over. The swarm was still hungry. More humans and would die before the day was done. But for the first time since the invasion began, the defenders of Prime were not fighting alone. The battle for Prime had lasted 18 hours, and humanity was losing. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, watching his fleet die piece by piece. The tactical display had become a graveyard. Red markers blinked out every minute, each one representing a ship, a crew, hundreds of lives erased in an instant. The swarm adapted to every tactic. When the human ships tried to concentrate their fire, the swarm spread thin. When the ships tried to protect the weaker vessels, the swarm attacked from all directions at once. They were not just fighting an enemy. They were fighting a mind that learned from every mistake. "Admiral," said his tactical officer, "we have lost 43% of our fleet. Ammunition reserves are at 30%. If we do not find a way to change this battle, we will be destroyed within 6 hours." Park said nothing. He had known this might happen. He had told his people they might not come home, but knowing something and watching it happen were two very different things. On the surface of Prime, the situation was no better. Commander Lee's fighter had been hit 4 hours ago. A swarm craft had come at her from below, its acid weapon tearing through her wing and sending her spinning toward the planet. She had managed to crash land near Sargent's position, but her ship was destroyed. Her left arm was broken. Her body was covered in burns. None of that mattered. The moment she could stand, she took command of the ground defenses. "Pull back the eastern line," she ordered, her voice steady despite the pain. "We cannot hold that position. Concentrate forces around the evacuation point." Watched her work. He had known for years, had seen her fly in exercises and simulations, but he had never seen her like this. She moved through the chaos like she had been born for it, making decisions in seconds that would take other commanders hours. "How bad is your arm?" he asked. "Bad enough," she said, "not bad enough to stop." Around them, the battle continued. The civilians kept coming, streaming out of the ruins in endless waves. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. They carried children and belongings and wounded family members. They looked at the human soldiers with eyes that could not understand what was happening or why these strange creatures had come to die for them. Private had not slept in 20 hours. Her medical supplies were almost gone. She had saved 47 lives and watched 11 people die in her arms. Each death carved a small piece from her heart. But she did not stop. She could not stop. A child, no bigger than a human toddler, sat alone near a destroyed building. It was crying, making sounds that broke through the noise of battle and weapons fire. Ran to it, scooped it up, and carried it to the evacuation zone. The child clung to her uniform like she was the only solid thing in a world that was falling apart. "You are safe," she whispered, knowing the child could not understand her words. "I have you, you are safe." She handed the child to a woman who might have been its aunt or neighbor or simply a stranger. The woman took the child and looked at with an expression that needed no translation. "Thank you." Went back to work. It was during her 93rd patient that she noticed something strange. She was treating a human soldier whose leg had been torn by swarm drones. The man was lying next to a pile of debris that included a broken power core. The core was damaged, leaking energy in slow pulses, and every time it pulsed, the drones in the area seemed to hesitate. Watched, she was not a scientist, she was not an engineer, she was a medic who had joined the military to pay for her brother's surgery, but she had grown up in a family that fixed things. Her father had been a mechanic. Her mother had built computers from spare parts. She had learned to notice patterns. The drones were avoiding the power core. She finished treating the soldier, then crawled over to the debris. The core was the size of her head, cracked down the middle, leaking a soft blue light. When she got close, she felt something strange, a vibration in her teeth, a pressure behind her eyes. The core was emitting some kind of frequency. And the drones did not like it. "Sergeant," she said into her communicator, "I found something." Was 30 meters away, fighting off a wave of drones with a weapon that was almost out of ammunition. "Not a good time, Private. The drones are avoiding damaged power cores. I think the frequency is disrupting them." Paused. A drone lunged at him and he killed it with his combat knife. Then he processed what it said. "Say that again." "The power cores. When they are damaged, they emit a frequency. The swarm drones avoid it. They will not come within 10 meters. Looked around. There were damaged power cores everywhere. The city had been full of them before the invasion. If what was saying was true, if the frequency could disrupt the swarm, then maybe there was a way to turn the battle around. "Commander," he said into the command channel, "we need to talk." 10 minutes later, the information reached the Eternal Dawn. Admiral Park listened to the report. His science officers analyzed the data had collected. They compared it to the power systems. They ran simulations. "It is possible," said the chief science officer, a woman named Shin. "The frequency seems to interfere with the swarm's connection. If we could amplify it, broadcast it through our communication arrays, we might be able to disrupt their coordination." "Will it work?" "I do not know. The swarm is adaptive. They might find a way around it, but right now it is our only chance." Park looked at his tactical display. 43% of his fleet was gone. His ammunition was running low. His people were dying. He had no other options. "Do it," he said. The science team worked fast. They did not have time for careful calculations or extensive testing. They modified the communication arrays, tuned them to the frequency had discovered, and hoped they were not making a terrible mistake. The broadcast began. At first, nothing happened. The swarm continued its attack. The human ships continued to die. Park watched the tactical display, waiting, praying to whatever force might be listening. Then in an instant, everything changed. The swarm fighters stopped. Not gradually, not carefully, but all at once, like puppets whose strings had been cut. They drifted in space, their movements confused and uncoordinated. Some collided with each other, some flew in random directions. "The was breaking. All ships," Park said, his voice cutting through the chaos, "push forward. This is our moment." The human fleet surged into the heart of the swarm formation. The ships followed. They fired everything they had. Missiles and lasers and weapons that had seemed useless hours ago now tore through an enemy that could no longer fight back. On the ground, the drones stopped their endless assault. They stumbled. They turned in circles. They attacked each other, watched in amazement as creatures that had been killing his soldiers moments ago collapsed into twitching piles of organic metal. "Push them back," he ordered. "All units advance, clear every sector." The human soldiers moved forward. For the first time in 18 hours, they were not retreating. They were not just surviving. They were winning. Private stood in the middle of the battlefield, surrounded by dead drones and wounded soldiers, and realized what she had done. A medic from Earth. A girl who had joined the military to pay for her brother's surgery. She had just changed the course of an interstellar war. She did not know what to feel. She was too tired to feel anything. So she picked up her medical bag and went to find the next person who needed help. By dawn, the swarm began to withdraw. Their ships, those that could still function, turned and fled toward the dark spaces between stars. Their drones burrowed into the ground or simply stopped moving. That was not destroyed, but it was broken badly enough that it could no longer fight. The battle for Prime was over. Humanity had won. But as Admiral Park looked at his tactical display, at the empty spaces where so many ships had been, at the reports of casualties that kept growing longer, he knew that victory had come at a terrible price. The war was not over. The swarm would return someday. The galaxy would remember this day in ways no one could predict. But right now, in this moment, they were alive. Their world still existed. Their children would see another sunrise. And a species that the galaxy had dismissed as weak and unimportant had proven them all wrong. The eternal dawn limped back to Earth with half its hull torn open and fires still burning in 3 compartments. Admiral Park stood on the bridge, watching through a crack as humanity's home grew larger against the darkness of space. Of the 147 ships that had left for Prime, only 93 returned. The others were scattered across the void, their crews forever part of the stars. The journey home took 12 days. 12 days of patching wounds, counting the dead, and trying to understand what they had done. Some of the crew celebrated. Some wept. Most simply existed in the strange space between triumph and grief that comes after a battle that should have killed them all. Park spent most of the journey in his quarters, writing letters to the families of the fallen. He wrote by hand, on actual paper, because some things were too important for screens and electronic signatures. Each letter began the same way. "Your son gave his life for a people he never met on a world he had never seen because he believed it was right. I wish I could tell you why this matters. I wish I had words that could explain the hole his absence leaves. But I can only tell you this: he was brave. He was kind. And because of him, children on Prime will grow up to live full lives. That is his legacy. That is what he died for." He wrote 2,047 letters. On the surface of Prime, the survivors began the long work of rebuilding. Sargent stayed behind with a small force of volunteers to help with the recovery. He told himself it was duty. He told himself it was because they needed security while their defenses were rebuilt. But the truth was simpler and harder to admit. He could not face going home. Not yet. Not with the faces of the soldiers he had lost still fresh in his mind. So he stayed. He helped clear rubble. He trained security forces. He sat with survivors who had no one else to talk to and listened to stories he could not understand in a language he did not speak. They did not seem to mind. They seemed to understand that some wounds could only heal with time and purpose. Private did go home. She returned to Seoul on a medical transport, her body covered in scars and her mind filled with memories that would never fade. The military gave her a medal. They gave her money. They gave her everything they had promised and more. Her brother got his surgery. He was recovering well. The doctors said he would live a normal life. She visited him every day for the first month. She sat by his bed and held his hand and tried to remember what it felt like to be a normal person with normal problems. He asked her about the war, and she told him the parts that would not give him nightmares. He looked at her with eyes full of admiration, and she smiled and pretended that the admiration did not feel like a weight she did not deserve. At night, she dreamed of the child she had carried to safety. She dreamed of the 11 people who had died in her arms. She dreamed of drones with too many legs and the smell of burning cities and the sound of her own heartbeat in moments when she had been certain she was about to die. She did not tell anyone about the dreams. Commander Lee accepted a promotion she had not asked for. They made her an admiral, second in command of what remained of the Earth Defense Fleet. She wore the new rank insignia and attended the ceremonies and gave the speeches that her position required. People called her a hero. They named schools after her. They put her face on recruitment posters. She hated all of it. What she wanted was to be back in a cockpit, alone in the dark, where the only thing that mattered was the next enemy and the next moment and the clean simplicity of survival. But that life was gone now. The injury to her arm had healed wrong. She could still fly, but not at the level she had once achieved, not well enough to lead pilots into battle. So she did her duty. She rebuilt the fleet. She trained new pilots. She sat in meetings and wrote reports and made decisions that affected millions of lives. And every night she looked at the stars and remembered the pilots who had followed her into the fire and never came back. Admiral Park returned to Horizon Station. He expected to be arrested. He had the coalition. He had taken the fleet without permission. By every law that governed interstellar relations, he was a criminal. Instead, he received a message from the Coalition Council. They wanted him to attend a special session. They wanted him to bring representatives from Earth. They wanted to discuss the future. Park went. He brought a handful of diplomats and a young woman named Sarah who had been the only voice in the council to support the rescue mission. They entered the great chamber where species that had ruled the galaxy gathered to decide the fate of worlds. The chamber was silent. High Commander stood at the center of the assembly. His silver skin had healed from the wounds of battle, but his eyes carried something new, something that had not been there before. For a century, said his voice filling the chamber, we dismissed humanity. We called them children, primitives, insignificant. We laughed at their small ships and their short lives and their strange habit of caring about things that did not benefit them. He paused. And when our world burned, when we begged the galaxy for aid, when every great power in existence found reasons to look away, they were the only ones who came. Turned to face Park directly. Not for glory, not for reward, not because they were asked. They came because they believed it was right. They came knowing they would probably die. They came knowing that no one would thank them if they succeeded and no one would mourn them if they failed. He raised his hand in what Park recognized as a gesture of deepest respect. I was wrong about your species, we all were. From this day forward the stand with humanity, not as superiors, not as benefactors, as equals, as allies, as brothers. One by one, the other species in the chamber rose. The ambassador who had laughed at humanity weeks ago bowed his head. The crystalline delegate pulsed with colors that meant agreement and shame. Even the cold counselor stood, his reptilian eyes fixed on Park with something that might have been respect. The vote was taken. It was unanimous. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Coalition, not as observers, not as children allowed to sit at the adults' table, as a voice that mattered, as a people who had earned their place among the stars. When the ceremony ended, Park stood alone at a window overlooking the great void. Earth was visible in the distance, a small blue marble in an ocean of darkness. Sara found him there. "Admiral," she said, "there are reporters who want to speak with you, leaders from every species. The galaxy wants to know why you did what you did." Park was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know why I joined the military?" he asked. Sora shook her head. "I was 19 years old. There was a fire in my building. An old woman was trapped on the upper floor. Everyone was standing around, waiting for emergency services, watching her window and doing nothing. And I could not watch anymore, so I went in. I was not trained. I was not prepared. I was terrified, but I could not stand there and do nothing while someone needed help." He looked at the stars. "That is all any of us did. We could not stand there and do nothing. We saw people dying and we went to help. That is not heroism, that is just being human." Sora smiled. "Perhaps that is what heroism is." Park did not answer. Back on Earth in the weeks and months that followed, things slowly returned to normal. The protests faded. The debates moved on to other topics. People went back to their jobs and their families and their ordinary concerns. But something had changed. In schools, children learned about the Battle of Prime. They learned about Admiral Park, who the galaxy because it was right. About Commander, who flew into impossible odds without hesitation. About Sergeant and his soldiers, who held the line against monsters. About Private, a medic who discovered the key to victory while saving lives. They learned that humanity was not small, that humanity was not weak, that when the darkness came, when no one else would answer, humanity stood up. And in the great silence of space, across 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 stars, species who had once laughed at Earth now spoke of humans with a different tone, with respect, with admiration, with a touch of something that might have been fear. Because they knew now what humanity was capable of. They knew that those who defend Earth are never ignored. And when the call came, no matter how impossible, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, the humans would answer. They would always answer.